Welcome back to another. This will be the first of a series called Scary Saturday. It's quite stupid, but anyway, it's what I got. If you watched the previous video, you'll know what I'm talking about. So anyway, this is the video highlight of the day, right? That last video I posted was because I was late. This I'm doing on time. So we're going to be reacting to scary videos every Saturday. Just watching something straight up fucking terrifying, right? And we already found our first video of the day. So 3 true subway horror stories animated, right? And I got Monster, please sponsor me. Anyway, let's do this, shall we? That's amazing. Yeah, to be honest, I prefer Monster over Bang. Bang tastes like cough syrup. Oh my god. What kind of taste y'all got?
How many of us take public transportation every day? Some of us travel by train, some by bus, and some by subway. Many of us used to take public transportation to get to work. We never think about the things that can happen there at night. I never thought anything could happen to me either, and so I always walked the subway distracted. Little did I know that I was being watched.
By who?
And when I decided to act, it was too late. It all started one rainy day. I got on the train like any other day to go home after work. The dim light of the subway flickered as the train moved through the darker tunnels. I sat down in a worn seat and, as usual, started using Instagram to pass the time. It was then that I saw it for the first time. A shadow, barely noticeable, moved at the end of the carriage. At first I thought it was my imagination, but as the train moved forward, the figure slowly approached. It was a man, but something was not right. His face was hidden under a hood, and his clothes were soaked as if he had been in the rain for days. I tried to ignore him, but I couldn't look away. When the train stopped at the next station, the figure slipped into the doorway and disappeared into the crowd.
Chapter 1.
My nerves calmed a little, but the uncomfortable feeling persisted. In the following days, I saw him again. Always at the station, always with the same stare. I began to wonder if he was following me. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, but I never saw him in the same carriage. He was always there in the corner of my eye waiting. Normally, someone would take another mode of transportation, change their schedule at work, or take a cab. But I wasn't like that. I was always a confrontational person. A person who asserts herself and never lets anyone walk all over her. So I decided to confront him, not knowing what I was getting into. That night, I decided to get off at the terminal station. Everyone gets off at the station before, so the platform is deserted, except for a flickering light at the end. This was no coincidence. I didn't just want to talk to this person in case he was a pervert or something. I would teach him a lesson. I walked over. The humidity in the air was palpable. The figure was standing in the shadow, motionless. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his penetrating gaze. I stood a few feet away, feeling the tension in the air.
That's the thing.
There was no one else around, just the two of us.
That's the thing. In every horror movie, it's off with someone trying to act brave and gets themselves killed, and then there's a series of murders afterward. That's the beginning of every fucking horror movie or series, every single time.
In the deserted station. Finally, I decided to break the awkward silence. Who are you? Why are you following me? There was no answer. The man remained motionless like a statue. I approached slowly, but he backed away, always keeping his face hidden under the soaked hood. So I was right. He was afraid of me. Otherwise, he would not have backed away. This filled me with courage and allowed me to face him with more energy.
Oh, God.
What do you want from me? The figure didn't speak. He just kept backing up further and further into the subway tunnels. Coward,
don't
come
follow
here.
him.
I won't leave until you tell me why you are following me. If you don't cooperate now, I will make you talk. I started to walk quickly towards him. He kept backing up, going deeper into the tunnels. When I was a few inches away from him, he suddenly stopped and turned around, staring at me. A shiver ran down my spine, but I couldn't stop there.
Bro,
I considered this an invitation to fight. I didn't expect it to come to this. I really thought he was going to chicken out, but furious and full of doubt, I lunged towards him to attack him. When I was a few inches away from him, my body stopped, frozen. I don't know how to explain what I felt at that moment, but my body froze on its own as if sensing danger, as if warning me that I was about to make the worst decision of my life. When I looked up, the man was staring. I started to back away slowly, sensing the danger. The man started walking toward me, and my survival instinct kicked in. I turned and ran up the stairs to the exit. His footsteps echoed behind me, and the sense of impending danger prompted me to run even faster. I exited the subway and found myself in the rain-soaked streets. I looked back, but the man was gone. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that maybe I had gotten rid of him. However, I didn't know how wrong I was. The next few days became a nightmare. I saw him everywhere, on the street, at my job, in my building. He was always there. It was no longer a question of him following me on the subway. This was much more personal.
Yeah.
I began to lose sleep. Paranoia took over. No matter where I went, I always felt his eyes on me. One day, when I left work, he followed me to my building. I ran up the stairs, but when I got to my apartment, he was already there, waiting for me in the dark. It was as if he knew my every move. Why are you doing this? As usual, he didn't answer me. He just stared at me, slowly approaching my position. It was then that I knew I couldn't escape him. He was a cunning predator, always one step ahead. My friends and family thought I was losing my mind, but I knew the truth. This man had decided to make my life hell without reason.
I'm editing this out, damn it.
I tried to report him to the police, but there was no tangible
evidence. I hear
evidence.
that song.
He always vanished before they could arrive. My sanity was fraying more and more every day.
Grab him.
I understood what I was going through. The shadow of that man loomed over every aspect of my existence. Finally, the day came when I faced him again. This time, I was determined to put an end to this nightmare.
You sure?
With a knife in my pocket, I let him follow me through the subway tunnels, leading me into the darkness where it all began. Finally, he caught up with me in an abandoned subway room. I turned around and showed him my knife, trying to scare him. As usual, he didn't flinch. You think I can't do it, don't you? Do you think you'll torment me? Think again. Furious and empowered by my knife, I threw myself at him. The simple movement. He stopped my wrist and squeezed it until my knife fell out of my hand. Then lifted his foot and gave me a strong kick in the chest that threw me several meters backward. Once on the ground, I tried to get up, but the pain was too much. By kicking me, the man had revealed his face for the first time. He was not a monster. He was not a being from another planet, and he was definitely nothing more than a person. Someone of flesh and bone, like any of you. Despite this, it was terrifying. His face was badly scarred from many other fights, and I could see he had a false eye. His long beard seemed to hide his mouth, which never seemed to smile. He might be a human, but a much stronger and more experienced human than me. There was no way I could beat him in a fight, knife or not. I had a chance to escape, and I didn't waste it.
Oh my god.
I ran through the tunnels, leaving behind the dark figure now groaning in pain on the floor. I got out of the subway and didn't look back. The terror I had experienced did not disappear. At least I was able to put some distance between me and him. I still don't know who that man was or why he decided to turn my life into a nightmare.
Good question.
But one thing was for sure. The subway, once my favorite mode of transportation, had become his favorite place to haunt me.
Then
I'm not going to lie to you.
Don't
Today,
go there.
He still follows me. I don't know who he is, and he never stops. Even when I'm with my friends and out of sight, I know he's out there, looking for an opportunity to attack me. Hello, everyone. We are thrilled that you have been enjoying our videos. Your support means the world to us. If you've liked what you've seen,
There's a certain type of pain that never goes away.
Achieve that goal. Thank you for being a part of our journey.
Anytime. Come on. Story 2. Let's do this.
There's a certain type of pain that never goes away. It's the type of pain where it hurts to wake up in the morning. It hurts to get out of
That's
bed.
like me during
and
school
it
time.
even hurts to breathe. That's how my life has been since the 12th of April, the day when I lost my 8-year-old daughter, Maddie.
Oh.
She was my whole world, as I was a single parent. Her father vanished during her infant years, and I'd never seen him since. It didn't matter to me, though, as she was all I needed. I loved and took care of her for the past 8 years, until the tragic accident. I had made plans to run to the grocery store that morning. Before I could leave, Maddie said she wanted to come with me. I was confused, as she was already old enough to stay home by herself, and it was only going to be a few minutes. It took me a while to realize, but she apparently wanted to get a box of Honey Nut Cheerios.
Yeah, I know.
I remember asking my daughter why she didn't just tell me to get the box. And Maddie said she wanted us to buy it together, as that would allow her to spend even more time with me. I smiled as my daughter told me this. Ever since she was little, she never wanted to leave my side. Even when I went out for quick errands, Maddie always wanted to join me. And she always made me feel like she wasn't just my daughter, but my best friend, too. That fateful day, after we'd gotten our groceries, Maddie wanted us to race to the car. I told her to slow down as I tried to chase after her. But before I knew it, I heard a gut-wrenching scream, and I couldn't see her anymore. It all happened so fast. People were gathering around her and screaming to call 911. That's when I realized that Maddie had been hit by a truck. The driver was apparently trying to avoid a red light and cut through the parking lot. It was a big truck, and Maddie was in the driver's blind zone. To make things worse, the driver was hitting the accelerator since he knew cutting the red light was illegal. And Maddie was killed on impact.
Oh,
my whole world was taken from me in a matter of seconds.
Oh my God.
And as bad as the pain was, the guilt was even worse.
Sad.
I didn't feel anything when the driver was arrested.
What is this?
My friends and family told me to find solace in the fact that justice was served.
What a story, so
but justice didn't really matter, as
so
it wasn't going to bring my Maddie back. I became an empty shell after that. I took an indefinite break from work, and I looked to my family for support. I rarely stepped out of the house and cried and sobbed my heart out for weeks on end. The only time I went out was to get food and a few house supplies. I always took the subway during these trips, as I hadn't touched the car after losing Maddie. I would often cry and mope during these subway rides, and I didn't care when the people around me started giving me stares. I had completely closed off the world around me, and absolutely nothing mattered. But all that changed when I saw her. Sitting directly across me on the subway was a pale little girl. While I wasn't sure, she looked like she was about the same age as my daughter, and she had the prettiest blue eyes I had ever seen. I didn't know why, but the child always looked me dead in the eyes during the subway trips.
You said it's not a ghost.
I thought there was something on my face at first, but after pulling out my mirror from my purse, I realized that there was nothing.
Oh,
I found the child's constant staring really confusing, and I started to wonder if there was something she wanted from me. Apart from the little girl's constant stares, another thing I found odd was how silent she was. As I said earlier, I couldn't tell her exact age, but from her appearance, she looked to be around 8 or 9 years old. I knew this child was oddly quiet for her age. The little girl kept staring at me without saying anything for the rest of the subway ride. And when my stop arrived, her eyes followed me as I stepped off the subway. The whole thing was a pretty bizarre experience, and I kept thinking about it as I went to bed that night. About 3 days passed before I used the subway again, and to my surprise, the little girl was sitting in the exact same position as she was during my last trip. As the trip commenced, I took my time to study the little girl. I noticed she was holding a few books.
Oh my god, man, why? If the little girl is there, how about you just don't go into the train? Just wait for the next load. Or maybe don't even use the subway, take a bus. Take a bus, Uber, something, anything. Even a okay, in South Africa, please don't use a taxi. But I promise you, you'll be walking on that thing without anything in your pockets. No, it's a true story. It's bad. Where I'm from, this place is riddled with thieves. It's the second highest crime rate in the world where I live. It's terrible.
Lunchbox. So she was probably on her way back from school. I tried to make some small talk, saying, "How was school today?" But the girl didn't respond, and she just kept staring at me. I told myself that she must be shy or a reserved child, which would explain why she was so quiet. But it still didn't explain her endless fascination with my face. I used the subway the very next day, but this time I came on with a bag of trail mix. It was one of Maddie's favorite snacks, and I thought I would give it to the strange little girl on the subway. After getting on the subway, I saw her sitting in her usual spot. So I said, "Hey there, little one. I don't know why you keep looking at me or why you're so fascinated with my face. I've actually been asking myself the same question for the past few days, and I still can't figure it out. But it's okay. You don't have to tell me why. I can tell that you're not much of a talker, but I've been thinking about you a lot. So, I got you a present." I then brought out the bag of trail mix before saying, "It used to be my daughter's favorite snack, so I thought I'd pick up a bag for you when I was at the store. I'm sure your parents told you not to accept anything from strangers, but it's a sealed snack, hoping it's okay. Plus, judging from your books, I can tell you're coming back from school and it's pretty late. So a quick snack should hold you over until you get home for dinner." She walked over and took the trail mix. The strange little girl had a big smile on her face as she opened the bag and took a handful of the mix. She then offered me some, and I thanked her. I talked to her for the rest of the subway ride, and even though she didn't say anything back, talking to the little girl felt therapeutic for me, and I felt good for the first time in a long while. This strange friendship went on for a while, as I would bring a few snacks for the peculiar little girl before going on the subway car, and she would eat them in silence while I told her about my uneventful day. I don't really know how to explain it, but talking to that little girl always made me feel better, and I found myself looking forward to meeting her as a few weeks passed by, and things remained the same until one particular subway trip. I had gotten the usual snacks, and I made my way to the subway car. But before I got in, I noticed something strange. The car was filled with strange-looking men who were all dressed in black coats. I wasn't one to judge people by their appearances, but I was really worried. Upon closer inspection, I noticed one of the men had a nasty scar on his face, and his eyes were bulging red, and his colleagues had similar appearances. The little girl I had befriended was seated in the middle of these men, and as I locked eyes with her, I could tell she was terrified. I wanted to rush onto the subway car and help her off, but before I could step in, she looked me dead in the eyes and shook her head, telling me not to get on. I don't know why, but every part of my body told me to listen to her. A few more people had arrived now, and they apparently didn't think twice about the strange men, so they all got on without a care in the world. The doors were about to close now, and I knew if I didn't get on the subway, I'd have to walk 40 blocks back home. This would potentially take 45 to 50 minutes, as I lived about 2 miles away from the subway station.
My God.
But in the end, I decided to listen to the little girl as I watched the doors close. It was a long walk home, and I kept thinking about the girl and the strange incident that happened that evening. I began feeling a little guilty as I told myself I should have done more to help the little girl get out of the subway car, but I also knew that taking her might have caused a scene, as I couldn't take a stranger's child off the subway without permission from their parents. I eventually got home and took a long shower. I was a lot calmer after the shower as I told myself that I was just being paranoid and that I'd see her on the next subway ride. I didn't think about it much after that. I then made some chicken for dinner and watched some TV. But while I was mindlessly switching through channels that night, I came across a horrific story on the news channel. 4 mutilated and bloody corpses had been found on the subway. The victims were missing most of their organs, and the authorities said initial investigations pointed to a ritual killing by an unknown ritualistic cult group, and further investigations would shed more light on the tragic murders. The hairs on my skin were already standing on end when they revealed the subway car was 9709, the very same subway car I always used, and the one I almost boarded that evening. That, in addition to the horrific murders, had already paralyzed me with fear. But what the news reporter said next shocked me to my core. According to the news reporter, this was the second murder in the cult's growing string of brutal, ritualistic murders. And the first murder happened late last year. The victim was a 9-year-old girl named Amber Thompson. Similar to recent murders, the little girl, who had been coming back from school, was viciously killed in the same subway car, and most of her organs had been taken out. They showed the picture of the girl.
Oh my god.
And I couldn't believe my eyes. Amber was the same little girl I had been talking to and buying snacks for on the subway. But it couldn't have been possible if she'd been dead for a year. I tried everything I could not to believe what they were saying on the news. But there was no mistaking those blue eyes. The little girl I had befriended was Amber. And the question I asked myself was how I saw and spoke to a child who had been dead for a year. The entire thing drove me crazy as my mind couldn't handle it. And I felt the only way was to find and talk to Amber's parents.
Because she never spoke.
It wasn't easy, but I managed to seek out Amber's mother, and I got my hands on her phone number. We both set up a meeting, and while I wasn't sure if telling them what I experienced would potentially open up wounds the family was still trying to heal, I knew I couldn't keep it to myself. After we'd sat down to talk, I wasn't sure if she was going to believe me. I mean, I was a complete stranger, telling her that I had seen and spoken to her dead daughter for days. But I gathered up the courage and told her everything. Mrs. Thompson listened quietly to my story. And when I was done, she looked me in the eyes and said she believed a strange story about how she could have sworn she'd seen Amber around the house a couple of times. And she'd also seen her with her school books whenever she passed her school. Our conversation would continue late into the evening, and we bonded over our shared loss. We talked for a few more hours before saying our goodbyes. I had never been a spiritual person in my life, but after my conversation with Amber's mother, I felt at peace, because even if I couldn't see her, I knew my baby girl is also watching over me. The story you just heard was shared by an anonymous Reddit user. The bizarre event was something his late grandmother, a woman named Natalie Coleman, apparently experienced on the subway in the early 90s. Due to the time of the murders, there was little to no information on the subway murder cases, apart from a few news articles that stated the gruesome murder suddenly stopped after the second incident, and neither the perpetrators nor the members of the cult were ever found.
Whoa.
Solo road trips are my favorite. I mean, is there anything better than exploring a new place all alone and experiencing the beauty of that place? For me, hardly anything comes close to that. However, sometimes solo road trips are not the safest things to do. You could run into some shady people, encounter an accident, or worse, be attacked by a wild animal. Fortunately to date, I've been successful in avoiding all these things because I always put my safety first. I have animal bear repellent spray with me at all times. I don't drive at night, no matter what. I stick to the speed limit and thoroughly research the place I'm visiting beforehand so that I know what I'm getting myself into.
I like this guy already.
However, the one factor I didn't consider that could harm me the most was the paranormal. I'm a man who studied science in college, so I didn't believe in ghosts or paranormal things.
Any place.
Until
it's quite shocking, actually.
I encountered something I probably shouldn't have. This happened when I was on a road trip to Minnesota.
Plus, I do 3D
My
animation.
grandma
I can
lives there,
actually
so
animate the
I decided
story.
to not only explore the state, but to stay with her for a few days as well. It was summer, so I decided to celebrate the 4th of July with my grandma, as we used to celebrate together in Minnesota when I was a kid. It would be a great nostalgic experience. However, over the years after my grandpa passed away, my grandma moved into a retirement community in Minnesota itself.
Nice.
If any of you don't know what a retirement community is, it's a community in which all the retired senior citizens live. She purchased a small home in this retirement community and was living there happily with all the other people her age. However, I'd never been to Grandma's new house.
Honestly.
She'd been asking me to visit, but the timing was never right until then. This retirement community was situated in a small town just near the Canadian border. It was summertime, so the weather was great. I was driving there from South Dakota, as I'd been exploring that state. However, once I got to Minnesota, for some reason, my GPS couldn't locate the town in which my grandma was living. So instead, I had to call her and get directions to reach her place. An old gentleman from the community decided to help me on my grandma's behalf, and he verbally told me the way. I noted all the exits and names of the roads that I had to take a turn on. Although I had the directions I needed, I still wasn't fully confident I would make it. But I knew I could call Grandma any time, or ask a passerby for directions. An hour later, I found myself driving on a deserted road. The road was small and there were fields on both sides of the road. My car could barely fit on it. I was very confident that I'd lost my way, despite following every instruction the gentleman had given me. As a solo traveler who loves to explore new places, I have a YouTube channel. Although it's not too big, I have several hundred short and long videos on it. I post everything that I experience while I travel. I also make travel tips and hacks for others who are interested in solo traveling.
Interesting.
When I was certain I'd lost my way, I set up my small recording camera on the passenger side of my car and started driving. The focus was set on the front of my car, but I was talking in the background, telling my viewers how I lost my way. This went on for another 15 minutes.
But if you went live,
I stuck to the road as there was no exit in sight, and finally decided to call my grandma again for directions, secretly hoping someone other than that elderly gentleman would tell me the directions. However, there was no signal.
They're all ghosts.
It was so frustrating, but lucky for me, it was just 11 in the morning, so it wasn't like I was driving all alone on an unfamiliar road at night. I kept driving and driving. The road was straight and there were only crop fields on either side of it. Also, not a single vehicle, let alone a person, had passed me in the past 2 hours. That's when I came across a train track. You know, the ones that are embedded into the concrete road at a pass.
Yeah.
It was weird in itself to find a track, but what was more surprising was what I saw there. This track looked abandoned, as it was rusted and the crops nearby had overgrown on it in some places. I told my viewers how weird it was to come across an old train track in the middle of nowhere. I stopped in front of it for a second, and then decided to just drive past it and continue my journey, when I heard a loud noise coming from my right. When I turned to look at the source of the noise, I realized there was a train traveling on the track. It was so odd that a train was traveling on this abandoned track, but I ignored it. I was waiting for the train to pass so I could cross the track and be on my way. However, as the first car came into view, I realized that there was no one operating the train. It was just traveling on its own. I also noticed that it only had 2 small cars, both of which were empty. I was constantly expressing how bizarre it was to encounter such a thing.
That is quite bizarre.
Once the train had passed, I drove past the track and adjusted my camera to focus on the back of the retreating train. I spoke continuously in the background, but my focus was on the road ahead of me, not on the traveling train to my left. A few minutes after that, I spotted an exit the gentleman had mentioned, and after that, finding the way to my grandma's place was pretty easy. Once I reached there around noon, she had prepared a feast for me. After lunch, I met some of the people from the retirement community, mostly elderly ladies, telling me how handsome I was and sneakily trying to set me up with one of their granddaughters. In the evening, we had a great dinner, and finally we called it a day. I went to my room, which was just a spare bedroom at Grandma's house, and opened my laptop for the first time that day. I set up my workstation, connected the camera to my laptop, and started editing the video. I didn't edit my content much. I believe in delivering unfiltered experiences to my audience. Around 1 a.m., I was done editing and uploading today's video on my channel. After that, I went to bed. The next day, I woke up late, and when I checked my phone, I saw it had hundreds of notifications. Turns out my video had gone viral, and everyone was commenting on it. There were so many comments that I knew I could never read them all. Plus, the video had 7 million views, just in a span of a few hours. I had my breakfast and then returned to the comments. And in almost every comment, people were asking me what was in the back of the second train car. I didn't understand what they were saying, so I decided to read some more comments. And one user called @I'mRocky said that he couldn't miss the weird creature that was sitting in the back of the second car. I decided to watch that particular part of the video again.
What?
And sure enough, there was something in the back of the car, but it was hard to figure out what it was. So I started watching the actual video on my laptop and zoomed in as much as I could. And to my horror, there was a black creature sitting at the back of the second car. It had a weird body and stick-thin legs. It also had 2 horns, and its face was shaped like a goat. It was something else altogether.
Oh my god.
A lot of people on the internet who saw my video had a lot to say about it, and I did agree with a lot of theories they put forth. But no one could clearly explain what I'd captured. I just decided to...
Right. All I have to say is that... Damn, that was fucking terrifying, but... To be honest, the one story that got to me the most, and I'm getting goosebumps again, the one story that got to me the most has got to be the one with the child, this story number 2. Story number 1 wasn't bad. It was honest, it was creepy, but it wasn't scary. Third one it had its moment, but it wasn't all that for me. I would say the second story got it to me. Comment down below what you think. Right, comment down below which story you found the most creepy. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. Bye.